On today's show, we've got some big questions after the Mavericks 2-0 start. Do you feel better or worse than you did before the season? I got Reggie Adetula here with me. Let's talk about that and more on today's Locked On Mavs.
I'm Luka Doncic, and this is Locked On Mavericks.
Mavericks, NBA champions. Bang! It's good, and the Mavericks have won the game.
If you don't believe, you shouldn't be here.
Loyalty never fades away.
And welcome. You are locked on to the Dallas Mavericks. My name is Nick Angstadt, media member and NBA channel manager for the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for being part of the show, making Locked On Mavs your first listen, where the best way you can help us grow the show is to listen every day and to comment anything below. Let us know in the comment section, what's one question you have after the Mavs' first two games? 2 games in. I've still got big questions. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA. Use the code, all lowercase, LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. And joining me, now weekly co-host of Locked On Mavs from 105.3 The Fan. What you got for me, Reggie Adetula?
I got to find something to fill the space now when you ask what you got for me. Like
every day, every time.
Just a guest sporadically, it's just like, all right, yeah, I'm just gonna blow right by that. Now I gotta actually have something. I'm gonna start getting like a fun fact or something. I don't know.
You can. It's a fun fact. That's where the Raccoon Squad came from. We told that story in Isaac's goodbye stream the other day. So if you want to hear how the Raccoon Squad started, go listen to that live stream.
Delightfully anticlimactic. I appreciated it.
But that's what happened there. But what I've got for you though is I got 2 dubs. I got 2 wins.
I'll take them.
We've got two wins for the Mavericks, 2-0. They didn't come easy. They didn't come in blowouts or anything like that. They came in clutch games. But so we each got 3 questions that we're gonna ask. We haven't told each other what the questions are, so some of them may be the same.
Yeah, I'm waiting for the overlap. It's gonna happen.
It will happen. But we've got 3 questions each that we want to ask about the Dallas Mavericks because they're 2 wins down, but they're 2 wins that I can make the case that these are not 2 great wins, right? That you don't feel amazing after these 2 wins. You'd hope that a team coming into this season with a lot to prove, with 2 all-star players against a San Antonio team with Wembanyama's first game and a really young San Antonio team, and then a Brooklyn team without really a star. Maybe Mikal Bridges steps into that, but didn't have their starting center, didn't have Cam Johnson. Like we're down a couple men. Now, my question to you to start now. Do you feel better or worse after these 2 wins? Are these discouraging wins or just encouraging that they got wins?
No, I feel better. And maybe that comes from the general pessimism that I carry within me, deep within my heart. No, I mean there's a certain level of proof of concept with a few things when it comes to these Mavs. Obviously, you see the Luka and Kyrie thing work together offensively, and then also a level of staggered minutes that allows that offense to continue to flourish. Now, of course, am I saying anything novel? No, that was the baseline. Everybody expected the offense to work. We saw a little bit of defense, and particularly like defensive schematic changes that I thought was interesting, that made it seem like they might not have just a certain set way of playing, particularly defensively, which, I mean, it doesn't necessarily mean that they'll be better at defense, but I do think that there's some opportunities to have different tools to throw at situations, imagine should give you an opportunity to be better at defense. And obviously there's a whole bunch of other things that we get into, but those are the 2 things that came to mind immediately that made me go, all right, I feel a little bit better without getting, hitting the really obvious one, which is Dereck Lively looking like a legitimate rotation player in the NBA.
That's definitely going to be one of my questions later on about D Live. But
so I shouldn't have said it. I should just let it live. Okay,
no. That's what you call a tease in the business, Reggie. Do you guys do those on the fan? You guys tease stuff?
Only a few times every day.
Yeah,
I should be better at it.
4 hours, you tease something. Go, turn it on, leave it on, and this is what you're going to leave it on for.
That's right.
I feel discouraged after these 2.
Okay,
I'm not going to lie. I'm going for it because I think that these 2 wins, having to come down to the end like this, it just reinforced that, all right, this team is not going to come in and be gangbusters right away and be ready to go right away, have an identity right away, know what they are. And maybe I shouldn't have expected that. Maybe I should. But against these 2 opponents, against a young San Antonio team with Wembanyama, against this Nets team, they made some decisions. They did some things that I didn't really understand. Par for the course sometimes. Like
I have to apologize that you felt that he should have played more.
But I think that The first game, like to come down to clutch moments with Luka Doncic hitting that insane shot against the Nets, that the Luka Don flick that will just continue in infamy. I don't feel as encouraged by these. There are encouraging things for sure. Like I'm gonna be encouraged by, Dereck Lively's play in the first game. I was interested why he didn't play in the second one. Kyrie Irving's offense is something that has stood out to me. We haven't really had a good Kyrie offensive game yet. And if you're not going to have that, then the Mavericks aren't going to win a lot of those games when he doesn't play. You've had the weirdest Tim Hardaway Jr. first half and second half in both these. I mean, he comes in the first half and he was good. Like I thought he's been good in the first half where he scores 10, 15 points. And then second half just makes such weird, dumb decisions that throw off the team, I think.
I wanted to ask that question, except as soon as the thought popped in my head, I was like, yeah, but that's the Tim Hardaway Jr. experience, right? One of the things that I found interesting about the Mavs this preseason was that people were like, oh man, Omax and Lively are starting. I was like, yeah, those are the unknowns on this team. Everybody else, you kind of know what they are. They're known commodities for the most part. And Tim Hardaway Jr., what do we know? If he's hot, he's going to pull up shots until the game is over. If he's not, he's going to put up shots until the game is over. Like that is the Tim Hardaway Jr. experience. And sometimes it happens in somewhat nonsensical ways and maybe when you should swing the ball, but hey, Tim Hardaway Jr., you know what you're getting. And when it's hot, it's really good.
One thing I am encouraged about is the play of Luka Doncic. If you were worried about Luka Doncic, I mean,
He play mate. Sorry.
Say it about yourself, Luka. He has been amazing. He's averaging 41 points. Shut it down! That is insane to me after 2 games. Shooting 58% from the field, 11.5 rebounds, 8.5 assists, only 2 turnovers per game so far. That means he's only had 4 turnovers so far to run this season. Thoughts on Luka's play so far? Because if you're going to be encouraged by anything, it's he came into the season. We were worried about the injury. We may be worried about his conditioning, but he looked amazing.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I'm taking things for granted, but it's like, all right, Luka is back on his BS to keep it somewhat family friendly. He's doing what in some ways I expect of him. And maybe the expectations are high, but he's a superstar in this league. And I also don't have the wider definition of superstar, and he's a legitimate bona fide superstar. So those are the things that I find interesting. Along with that, and if you'll allow me to transition into my question, one of my questions, I'd mentioned the rotation, how his changed a little bit. Yep. And I thought that tied directly with something that we actually saw for the first time, even though we've heard about it for years, which is the pace of this team. And because he was leading the charge in some ways. It wasn't just, hey, Luka, throw it up and the rest of the actual fast dudes will take care of transition. He was pushing the pace as well. And I wonder if, the change in his minutes and the way that those are dispensed is to keep him as fresh as possible so that those bursts continue to exist. And that made me ask myself, does this pace actually stick? Because through 2 games, it's been really good pace. And obviously we can't look at numbers because the sample is such that, it's going to be kind of nonsense.
Can't we?
Well, we can do it. Aren't they they're top 4 in pace? If I remember correctly, I glanced at it earlier.
The number to me that I'm looking at for the Mavericks, when it comes to pace, is the amount of time they spend in transition. So the last, all the way back to 2000, oh my gosh, 2017 is even slower. Since 2016, this is like the Locked On Mavs era of the Mavericks. Right. Ever since this podcast existed,
I'm pretty sure that's what everybody in the team calls it too. Yeah, the Locked On Mavs era. Yeah.
That's pre-Locked On Mavs that season, wasn't it? You go back to that. Since then, they've been 30th or 28th or 29th in pace in the transition opportunities they get on offense.
And in some of those years, they told us they were going to play fast.
Right. It's either been 10%, 11%, 13%, 12% of the time they play in pace. And so I'm looking at each of these games and I'm saying, okay, how much of the time did they push the pace a little bit? First game, 16%. Awesome. They pushed it. They pushed it forward. Guess what the last game was?
Oh, no.
9%. I did not think that they played faster against the Nets. I didn't see a lot of times when they pushed the pace. You saw it in the first one where Luka was throwing the hit-ahead passes, and you saw Luka running in transition. You saw guys push the pace, but I don't think they did it against the Nets very often. Part of that is because the Nets made so many dang shots and they made so many threes that it's hard to push the pace a lot if you're not getting as many stops and you're not getting as many you're not getting as many opportunities the other way. So coming up, let's talk about how they get that pace. How they push that pace going forward. How can they do that when they're playing against a smaller team and all that? Do they have to keep that up. So we'll talk about that. And then I got a question about Kyrie. What's going on with Kyrie? Talk about that coming up. But before we do, let me tell you about Prize Picks. Prize Picks is daily fantasy made easy. You can go to Prize Picks right now, and all you have to do is pick 2 to 5 players and more or less on their projections. It's a fun game where you can do all kinds of stuff. For example, they've got this. Let's do this one. Let's do Boston versus the Wizards. Jaylen Brown, more or less 19.5 points for him. Let's say I pick more for him. I pick Jason Tatum, 24.5. Give me more on that one too. And then I'm going to go, I wish I could do Jordan Poole field goal attempts, but I'm just going to do Jordan Poole 22.5. I'm going to go less on that. And so I'll pick more on both the Celtics. If I put down $20, I can win 45 on that right now. If I put down 100, I can win 225. If I go to the power play, that can get me all the way up to $500. You can play that. You can do it with NFL. You can do it with MLB, with the World Series. You can do it with NBA. All kinds of different stuff. Doesn't have to just be points either. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA, and you can get a first deposit match up to $100. So again, go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA. Use the code LockedOnNBA for first deposit match up to $100. That's prizepicks.com. Thanks, everybody, for hanging out with us on Locked On Mavs, being part of this show, part of the Raccoon Squad, listening every day. We appreciate each and every one of you. If you want to support the show, get a text from me on Mavs Rumors. Watch film with me. I watched the fourth quarter of the Mavs-Nets game, and I'll pause stuff. I'll point out stuff that I notice, the lack of transition opportunities. I'll point all that stuff in the video. Subscribe to the subtext. Click the link in the description and get text straight to your phone. All right, Reggie, let's get into the transition opportunities. So I thought we saw them in the first game. According to the numbers, we didn't see them in the second game. Right. What's the difference to me? Is it just intentionality?
I think that you hit one of the big ones, which is, you get the ball out of the bucket. Now the transition isn't quite the same. It might be because, like I mentioned earlier, this is one of those things that at the beginning of the season we talk about, and it's one of the things that's a focus, and very quickly it can fall by the wayside because it takes a lot of effort to continue to do that. And obviously, you have different personnel in some of these situations. But I'm intrigued on seeing if it continues, because these first 2 games feel kind of, I don't want to call them abnormal necessarily, but they were kind of specific situations. We understand why San Antonio was in particular. The Nets not having their starting big and basically playing what felt like 5 out most of the game. So I think that those things kind of shifted the way that
they played 4.5 out. They played 4.5 out with Ben Simmons as the half. It was kind of out.
I don't even know where to start when it comes to Ben Simmons.
He's nowadays a center. He's playing the Jokic role, just like a really bad version of it.
I was like, is he though? Okay. He tried.
He took the tip. He took the tip ball. Just like,
and that's what determines what's the center. That's right. Absolutely.
I think some of it is intentionality. I think it's got to be a thing. I go back to in practice one day, I asked Maxey, said, what do you guys have to do to push this pace? He goes, get the rebound, push it ahead. And then he stopped and was like, do you want me to say anything else? Because it's kind of it. Like it is on them to make the decision. And it goes back to, I think it goes back to Luka and old habits, where he's got to trust the guy he's kicking ahead to. And I'm not sure that the Tim Hardaways, the Josh Greens, the Derrick Jones Jr., like, I'm not sure that those are the guys that he's going to trust to kick ahead to. And he's just going to want to slow it up and get a good shot out of it. And so
I also wonder how much the Dereck Lively factors in, because Dereck Lively, when he gets those boards, he seems very content to push it out. And obviously, you mentioned, didn't play as many minutes. So getting those rebounds and then sending them out, you have to have a willing passer as well.
It's 2 games, so the sample size is not big, but it looks better in game 1. It didn't look as good in game 2, so that's where we are with pace. All right, I'm going to ask my next question about Kyrie Irving.
Yes, sir.
What's going on with Kyrie Irving? That question could be asked in a multitude of different ways.
Yeah, I was like, where are we going to start?
Just to look at he's averaging 19.5 points, 6 assists, shooting 39% from the field, 17% from the 3-point line. He's only got 1 turnover a game, so he's only had 2 turnovers so far. Right now, his plus minus total on the season is -6, so the Mavericks have lost the minutes that he's played so far. What are your initial thoughts on Kyrie Irving starting the season, and why is his offense not there?
The thing that I've noticed, and it's funny because obviously Luka and Dereck Lively have an incredible understanding and feeling between themselves. I watched pick and roll with him and with Kyrie and Dereck Lively II, and it didn't quite look the same. Obviously they managed it, right? It's a big target, all these things, but it didn't quite look clean. And it felt like all the pick and roll looked a little clean or a little messy. And then all the pick and roll, when it came to actual rollers, pick and pop, and just anything screen related felt a little off. It just feels like he hasn't found his rapport with everybody on the team, which is weird because obviously they had the games towards the end of the season, but this is where we talk about it taking time. It feels like you still haven't added that much time on this when you consider he's played what, 3 games at this point to be in. So we've added 3 games to what was last season. Of course, there's practices and so on, but I still don't believe that to be a ton in addition to what we already had seen. So I think that some of that is going to be an adjustment. Now, the actual shooting, he mentioned himself, I think in post game on Friday, is just he's missing short. And so he's going to get himself in the gym. And obviously I see missing short and I'm like, oh, that's a leg situation. And he seems to be feeling somewhat similar. So I think that's the shooting portion of it. And then the other component of it is it felt like the movement on the floor is just not quite exactly they're not quite exactly dialed in with each other on the floor, at least when it comes to Kyrie in particular.
There's been a couple of finishes, and he's still averaging 20 points a game, 6 assists. So he is still getting stuff done, but shooting 40% from the field, 17% from 3, that's just not the really efficient Kyrie we've been used to at this point. I think to me, his lack of offense has just been maybe luck, but just like you said, it's short on some of his threes. He's shooting 1 for 11 on 3-point attempts that are 25 to 29 feet, which is just a little bit 3-point lines usually 20, between 20 and 23, 24 feet. So just a little bit farther back, he's not hitting those shots yet. And once he starts hitting those shots, it's different. And that takes him from the 19 points a game he's averaging right now to the 27, 28, 29 that we expect from him. I feel like that is the big difference, but that's 9 points. That's 9 points. The Mavericks really need those 9 points, and they need him to be able to hit those. And if he does hit those, maybe these games become a little different, and they aren't as close down the stretch at this point. He's also only getting 2.5 free throw attempts per game so far, which I think getting to the line is going to be helpful for him. He avoids so much contact at the rim. He can finish so well, and some of the finishes haven't been there exactly. It'll be on the rim and then spin around and fall. But I wish he would just take a little bit more contact at the rim on these instead of just trying to maneuver around so that it misses the contact and gets the ball in.
That's got to be 15, 16, 17 years of conditioning though at this point. I don't know how much you're going to change that in particular. And also as I think about it, they played 2 very athletic teams. So I think the driving was just a little bit different when it came to, not to say that there's going to be teams that particularly stop Kyrie, but it seemed to be a little bit more labored than it normally would be rather. Yeah,
he's not getting the wide open stuff to the rim really. He's not getting he's not beating guys off the dribble with the smaller team in the Nets and the younger guys with the Spurs, I guess, and then Wembanyama just behind it.
Did you notice the change in the game? And it feels really stupid to say, but did you know the change in what it felt like the Mavs demeanor was when Vic had got that 4th and then the 5th foul, and just the game opened up for them in a way? It almost felt like constantly during the game since that Kyrie midi got blocked, they were like, all right, but we always have to look out for where is Vic? Where is he on the floor? And so I wonder how much that also factored in, being the dude who got blocked in that instance.
Well, and Kyrie got a jumper blocked in the first quarter, which was just unheard of, a mid-range jumper from Kyrie. You have to all of a sudden you get a mid-range jumper that Kyrie, who's played so much basketball, thinks I can get this shot off. No, he couldn't. He couldn't get that shot off, and all of a sudden you have to recalibrate every shot you take with that guy on the court.
Yeah, Victor's going to come out and change your entire perception of basketball at this
And they
point.
let him roam too. He plays the 4. They got Zach Collins back there.
Handcuff him to Zach Collins.
And the Mavericks started Derrick Jones Jr., so he's on Derrick Jones Jr. and just roaming wherever he wants. And even when he's on Josh Green, he can still close out quick enough to that's going to be a problem for a lot of teams. Him just roaming around the place and you having one guy that's maybe a shaky 3-point shooter out there.
You mentioned one of my questions, or at least one of the focuses of it, which is what is the desired effect with Derrick Jones Jr.? Because he's very clearly one of a short rotation of 8, 9 that Jason Kidd has felt comfortable with early. and he feels really comfortable. And I'm wondering what the desired effect is besides just, I think if you go with a very basic, interpretation of it, it's like, oh, clearly he believes Derrick Jones Jr. is his best perimeter defender. And so he wants him on the floor. That's what it feels like.
It's like he wants him to be, though, right? Like, it feels
sure.
like because he's finished both games with Josh Green,
right,
instead of Derrick Jones Jr. Like, we see Derrick Jones Jr. at the beginning, and then we don't see him pretty much the rest of the game.
Yeah, well, the game told you some things as well in both of those instances.
They also, I feel like they want him to be, like a lob threat type guy, but they don't look that way at all, or even try. Like, he doesn't even set screens and roll for anybody because
his screens aren't effective.
Yeah.
Too. He's a wiry dude, and I have to go back and look. I know that especially with Chicago, he played a good amount of 5, but I want to see how much actual pick and roll 5 it was in, because he did not look all that comfortable setting screens, or maybe there just wasn't enough familiarity. But like, it seemed like, and I think I texted you this, it's like, are they kind of trying to use him as a pseudo 5? And I saw those screens and they just weren't effective. It's one of the things that I saw specifically with Kyrie was that, all right, set the screen and then nothing happens. And now we wasted 3-4 seconds with whatever that was. Yeah. And so it just made me wonder, like, what is the desired fit here? Because they're trying to do some interesting stuff, and I just don't know that it's actually going to be beneficial for them.
They're also not using him to kick out to in transition, right? Like, we want them to push ahead. You talked about the pace earlier. So they're not really doing that either with him. And so then it's like, all right, are we just using him as a catch and shoot, what we normally use our wings for, the Reggie Bullocks, the Dorian Finney-Smiths, the Grant, are we just using him for that? Because that's not what he's good at. And so then all of a sudden, you're not using him to his skills, and then he becomes less effective. You still get the length on defense, and I think that's been helpful. But I still think Josh should start and play more. And
probably.
My answer to your question, what's the desired effect of Derrick Jones Jr.? I don't know that we're getting it right now.
If we are, then you need to change your desires. But hey, man, that's the head coach that of these Mavs is Jason Kidd. He likes throwing things out there, and early on, it seems like he's definitely using this as a laboratory environment for him.
Coming up, is Dereck Lively II's role closer to what we saw against the Spurs, or closer to what we saw against the Nets? We'll talk about that and more coming up. But before we do, let me tell you about FanDuel. FanDuel Sportsbook has a new customer deal. $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 money line bet. That's $150 for any team. If your team wins on the money line, go check it out. See what they have on FanDuel. Let's check out what the money line is right now for the Rangers. Rangers, Game 3. Rangers are a 1.5-point favorite in that game in Arizona, which is, it's kind of wild to me. You can put down it's minus 112 for the money line right there if you want to just bet the Rangers win on that. So you can check it out. The over/under is that 9? I don't know how baseball betting works, but you can go check out the money line on that 100 minus 112 on the Texas Rangers, and you can put down $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you're a new customer on the money line. Again, check it out, FanDuel.com/lockedon. It's not just baseball. They have all kinds of NBA action, all kinds of NFL action as well. Check out some of the Cowboy stuff coming up. Check out some of the Mavericks stuff. They have finals odds, awards odds, all that kind of stuff. Again, FanDuel.com/lockedon. Kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL.
Explain yourself. Sorry.
All right, Reggie, we're asking each other questions about the Dallas Mavericks season so far. We've talked about Kyrie, we've talked about Luka, we've talked about the desired effect of Derrick Jones Jr., whether we're getting it or not. My next question for you, and my last one, why didn't Jason Kidd play Dereck Lively much in Game 2 versus Brooklyn? Are we getting closer? Is the role we're going to see closer to what we saw against San Antonio or against the Nets?
That's a great question. I would hope that it's closer to what you see against San Antonio. Like, it's very clear the impact that he has in a game when it comes to obviously the obvious ones, the pick and roll threat, as particularly as a lob threat, and the ways in which it puts a defender in a real decision making situation. But then also the talking on defense, the energy, those types of things are undeniable. I wonder again if this is one of those situations where it's Jason Kidd trying to add things in his tool bag and feeling like having other things to throw out there, because it was a very clear size discrepancy when it came to the Brooklyn Nets not having Nick Claxton. They were playing Dorian Finney-Smith at the 5 sometimes, right? I wonder if he felt more comfortable with Dwight Powell's navigation. And I wonder if he went hot hand theory as well, because Dwight obviously kind of caught a little bit of fire, including hitting a three, which I don't
because he hit the 1-3.
Look, sometimes I don't get to make the rules, but it felt like he was on fire. So that's what I'm going to say.
He's on fire. He's hitting up. He's
that's right. So again, this 2-game sample makes it kind of tough, because are we hyping on the anomaly, or is this going to be indicative of something? But I feel like the way that they've tried to kind of talk about this is Dereck Lively is probably going to start, although they didn't name him particularly. We kind of saw through, and then obviously getting him an opportunity to get closing minutes. I think that more often than not, they're probably going to depend on him, especially because defensively he matters, and we know this coach cares a lot about defense.
I went back and I watched Lively's minutes against Brooklyn because I wanted to see, okay, did they see it was a disadvantage when they had Lively in there and just decided to go to take him out because he was hurting them? Or did they just see the advantage in having the switchability? Because that's what they wanted. They wanted to be switchier. They wanted to have the switchability.
And they did switch everything
of Maxey and Dwight, and they decided to do that but watching Lively's defense, even when Lively switched, I thought that he was fine. I thought you weren't disadvantaged playing Lively out there with his defense. And then his lob threat did add an advantage where the Mavericks are able to go to that, take advantage of him at the rim with a Ben Simmons or a Dorian, like you said, defending him at the 5. He had an advantage there and hit 4 shots and even hit a hook shot on a post, I was like, let's go. Let's get more of that on that post up. And so the other thing I take away from what Jason Kidd said after the game was, Lively hasn't seen, I almost went into Jason Kidd voice, but you just got to get real quiet and
real soft.
Lively hasn't seen that kind of a setup in a smaller team, more athletic. They got wings out there, Doe's out there. We know him really well here, and so
that's a solid 7, I think.
But if he hadn't seen it, then what? I didn't see anything in at least what I watched again. That was there was a disadvantage, and I don't think they got an advantage not playing him either.
Can I do the thing being a radio guy where I tie this into anota sport? Shout out to the Texas Rangers.
Here we go. Let's go.
I think that this might be in some ways, and I'm going to praise Jason Kidd's head coaching. Just hang on. I think that some of this, I see your face. I'm trying. Just stick with me. Hopefully it works at the end, and if it doesn't, you can tweet me or something. I think it's like what Bruce Bochy has done with the Rangers, where he's stuck with some guys, even though in situations it's like, this doesn't quite make sense. This doesn't feel expedient in the moment. But I wonder if some of this is like managing the people, is like, you need to make sure the guys know, hey, you're still in here. And if I need to call upon you, I'm going to call upon you. And so there's a level of managing actual human beings and not assets as we try and make them sometimes. And I wonder if some of this is just, hey, Dwight, I know you see all these other centers that we brought in and how we talked about all postseason or all offseason that we need to bring in centers, and you play center. That was your position. Understand you're still a part of this and we need you. And so I wonder how much that factors in, or if I'm just doing some level of, outside thing where I'm trying to build this up. But I wonder how much that factors into the decision-making process.
Yeah, I gave him credit after the first game because he didn't start Lively, and he wanted to keep him out of that crazy energy-filled fast first quarter that they played because he didn't want him to pick up fouls. And I was like, that's either a genius excuse or a genius reason to not have started Lively, in that game. But at the end, he saw what he could bring and played him. Then in this game against the Nets, he started him, but then didn't see the advantage. He played 3 minutes the whole second half, and like you said, played Dwight Powell. I don't know you have to play those games with Dwight Powell, though. Everyone talks about he's the consummate professional and all that. So you also can't play Dwight and Dereck Lively together. That's just not going to happen.
Right.
And so
you mentioned
maybe some of that.
Switching was the entire defensive game plan. It was one of the things that was nice that they had that opportunity. And what it definitely did is it kept the Nets out of the paint, which they did a decent amount. The Spurs did rather in game 1 with straight line drives, especially before you got Dereck Lively in the game. And so making sure that you could switch and keep your defenders in front of them they didn't seem too upset to take the shots, but made them take a whole bunch of jumpers, which they were going to do, but it made it easier on them to make that decision. So sometimes I think it's just like having another club in the bag was, the switchability, and maybe they liked Dwight Powell to do that better than they did Dereck Lively, who it seemed like on screens was just playing a drop.
Kidd also just does this thing that a lot of coaches do. He goes with known commodities and known quantities in a tight game, and so he went with Tim Hardaway played instead of Dereck Lively because they went small and they decided to go that way, and he basically did that instead, and he went with the known quantity in Tim. And honestly, I think Dereck Lively would have helped better, but that's hindsight. I got to see the whole second half and see the decisions that Tim made, and then decided to go that way with it. Did you have one more question?
Yes, I do, but you want to talk about one person who maybe you do need to make sure that he knows he's in your plans. Hello, Tim Hardaway Jr. What happens?
You need to make sure that other teams know that he's in your plans as well too, right?
Finally, what happens with this team against the dominant big? And I started thinking, I was like, oh man, there's dominant bigs in the West, and maybe there's not as many as I wanted to think of, but really the only big that you faced that was going to play big is Zach Collins. And Zach Collins is what, like a passable rotation big in the NFL or NBA. I wouldn't necessarily say that he's something to write home about, and I don't mean that as disrespect to him. But what happens when you start getting some of the bigs in this league that are going to really challenge? What's that going to mean for? Obviously, Derek is going to be the face of this. What's that going to mean for him? What's that going to mean for the entirety of the defense around him? Are they going to continue to crash down and do certain things like that? I'm just really intrigued for that samples or that data set once we get to those points in the season, once we see how this defense actually deals with bigs that can maybe make it tough on Derek in the paint.
Yeah, there really aren't that many bigs anymore. I was listening to Zach Lowe on his show, and he was talking about Anthony Davis, and he was even saying, like, everyone wants Anthony Davis to be this 30-point, go get a bucket type big, and even he's not that. I was like, okay, well, if even he's not that, then there's really only two in the NBA. It's Jokic and it's Embiid. And the Jokic one is coming up soon, right? You look at the Mavs' first 5 games right here, and he's coming up November 3rd. I mean, he's coming up at the Nuggets. That one's going to be a good test. The Bulls one is kind of interesting with Vucevic because that's a big that will also try to do some post-up scoring type things. And so I'm curious to see that he gets the like Dereck Lively, if he plays good minutes against the Bulls, will get the appetizer to the Jokic game. Like here's a version of what Jokic could be if he wasn't as skilled and wasn't as quick and wasn't as strong and all that. And then you get the actual one in Jokic the next game. Other than that, there's really not that many bigs like this. Like the game coming up against Minnesota or against Memphis, Jaren Jackson Jr. is not really hurting him.
The Steven Adams injury there probably saves you from a little bit.
And Brandon Clark.
Great point. My thought was just like to be where you want to be in the West. Because look, I fully think of this team as maybe a play-in type situation, and to be where you want to be in the West, you're going to need to beat some of these teams that have some bigs. And so that was where my mind went. And of course, our minds make certain things bigger than they need to be. And like you mentioned, there's not that many bigs that you have to contend with, but you're going to face one or two. And so I'm interested in seeing how this team handles that.
And we'll see it against Nikola Vucevic. We'll see it against Jokic coming up here pretty soon in the next couple of games. Those are our questions about the Dallas Mavericks right now. So tomorrow we'll be back. Slightly Biased will be with me for the Memphis game. He'll be back with me on the Bulls post game as well. Mark Followell coming on Wednesday's episode. So a lot of good stuff here on Locked On Mavs. Stick with us. Subscribe to the show. Guys, thanks so much for listening to Locked On Mavs.
Peace out.
Boom.